So this is the Lead Panelist Workshop from community boards and neighborhood courts. And I'm Liz Gewurtz, and I'm the new Observer Coordinator for neighborhood courts and community boards. This workshop will go over specific best practices that a lead panelist can use in order to foster empathy for the participant, promote collaboration with other panelists, choose and deliver directives. And the training is designed for all panelists to explore these issues. It'll also help panelists who would like to learn more about the role as they consider becoming lead panelists. Just to let you know, the chat has been disabled, and please write down your questions and share them at the end during the Q&A session. So let's do intros and an icebreaker. And we'll start with our name, how long we've been at neighborhood courts, your favorite movie, and one reason why it's your favorite. So I'll start. My name is Liz Gewurtz, and I've been at community courts only about 3 months now. And my favorite movie, I haven't even thought about that yet. It is, I think it is Animal Kingdom, because it shows the intricate working of a family system. And I will pass to Jackson, our fearless leader.
Oh, hi, everybody. So good to see everybody's lovely faces and even see their names on the screens if your face is not on there. I am with the DA's office and been with neighborhood courts since we started the second iteration in 2012. Anyhow, my favorite movie has got to be The Godfather, #1. #2 is not bad as well. #3 kind of sucks, but yeah, #1. And it's basically because it's written so well, it's acted so well, and the stars who are involved in that movie are legendary. So yeah, it's got to be The Godfather. Also want to share one embarrassing fact is that I still listen to Air Supply. So for those of you who know Air Supply, it's a little campy music, a little over flowery, but I like to listen to it sometimes. Anyways, so that's all from me. I will pass it on to Mr. Budak.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces that I've gotten to know over the years, and I've had the pleasure of working with. And for those who I have not worked with, it's nice to meet you virtually, and I hope that we can meet in real life sometime soon. I'm in my 9th year on neighborhood court, and for a majority of that time, I've actually been the lead panelist. I'm proud to say I don't listen to Air Supply or any yacht rock because I'm too cool for that. But, knock yourself out, Jackson. That's great. It shows your sensitive side. My favorite movie isn't actually my favorite movie, but it has my favorite movie character of all times, and that's Pulp Fiction, and it's the Wolf, Winston the Wolf. And if any of you've seen that movie, it's played by Harvey Keitel, and he's the ultimate fixer. He walks into absolute chaos, and with precision, he just runs down how he's going to fix this and gives directions and remains very cool through the whole process. So Winston the Wolf is my idol. Thanks. I'm going to pass it over to Doc Patel.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. My name is Doc Patel. I've been a panelist for, I think, about 7 years now. And let's see, icebreakers. Favorite movie, I would have to say Shawshank Redemption. And the reason why I like it is, #1, it demonstrates, the lack of rehabilitation opportunity in prison or jail, wherever you happen to be. And we represent the opposite of that. it's also really well played, well done, and just a terrific movie overall. And I will pass it on to, let's see, how about you, Nancy?
Hi, sorry, I am it's loud on my end and I have to turn off my camera. I'm Nancy. I've been with Neighborhood Courts for 2 years now, and my favorite movie is About a Boy. Why do I really like that movie? Because I think it was I don't know. I just really like that movie. All the character story were really well built and really spoke to me when I watched it for like the first and the 10th time.
Linda, would you mind going next since you're our third lead panelist?
Sure. So I'm Linda, and I've been in neighborhood courts since the regeneration that Jackson talked about. I don't know how many years it's been. And my favorite movie, I've got lots of favorite movies. Of course, I just watched Barbie and I loved it. But King of Hearts is one of my old-time favorite old movies. King of Hearts, Beat the Devil, Black Orpheus. Those are all movies that are just kind of, I could watch them over and over again. They're classics, and I can't tell you why. I think it's because all the characters are a little weird, a little different, and that very much appeals to me. All right, I will pass it along to my namesake, Linda Horning.
I think you're muted, Linda.
Linda, you're muted.
Okay, how about now? Good, okay. Hi, everybody, good to see you guys. So I think I've been here in Neighborhood Court for about 9 years, which is sort of surprising. I would say 7, but I think I came in around the same time that Mark did in that kind of wave a long time ago. A favorite movie, I think it'd be hard to pick, but Best Years of Our Lives is a favorite, a real good one. I like black and white movies, and I like it when the dialogue is good, and that movie certainly has that, and it has a good soundtrack, which I think is also helpful. So that's it, and I laugh at Jackson's being willing to be vulnerable about air supply. I think that's a really good trait to have in somebody who's in charge of a lot of things. So. And I will go to Merle.
I've been with Neighborhood Court, I think, for 11 years, but I'm not certain of that. I think I came in, Jackson was there when I was there, but hadn't been there long. Anyway, it's a long time. And my favorite movie is Singing in the Rain, Gene Kelly.
Classic. Would you mind passing it on to somebody who has
Oh, sure. Mary Louise. There she is, or isn't?
Well, I just came on the scene. Can I pass it along and come back later?
Of course.
Thank you.
Ada, would you like to go?
Did you say Aida?
Yes. Oh, Aida, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wasn't listening there. Hi, I'm Aida Berkovitz, and I've been, I predate all of you. I think I started in 2007. So I thought Jackson was doing it back then, but I guess not, based on what he said. So I don't know how many years that is, but since about 2007, 2008, I've been doing Neighborhood Court. And my favorite movie is Cabaret with Liza Minnelli. I like it because I love the historical aspect of it, the characters, and of course the music. And now I'll pass it on to Regina. Regina, you're on mute.
Mute. Oops. Mute. How's this? Good?
Mhm.
Okay, sorry guys. I'm Regina Anneby. I've been doing this since 2012. And my very favorite movie of all time is the original version of Black Orpheus. And I like it because of the music, the wonderful samba music, and the fact that it's based on a Greek myth and was filmed in Brazil. And I will pass this on to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Salisbury. I've been with Neighborhood Courts for, I think, about 3 years, off and on. And my favorite movie of all time is Princess Diaries. You've got Julie Andrews, Hector Elizondo, Anne Hathaway, what's not to love? I will say, now that I've lived in San Francisco for a number of years, I know how inaccurate some of the neighborhoods that they're describing in the movie are represented, but other than that, it's a classic. I will pass it to Howard.
Hello, Howard Wong. I'm in North Beach, and I was on the original North Beach court, so I guess that started around 2007, 2008. My favorite movies, I seem to always watch Casablanca or It's a Wonderful Life when it comes on television during certain times of the year. But another movie, more modern movie I like is Godfather 2, in particular the scenes of the streets of old Italian New York City. Those are kind of captures my imagination. Okay, the next person, I don't know who hasn't, let's see, has Linda spoken yet?
Chuck,
Linda?
I spoke. Go ahead. Chuck hasn't spoken.
Okay, Chuck.
Okay. I'm Chuck Raznikov. This is the beginning of my 4th year with Neighborhood Court. And I'm not sure it's my favorite movie, but I love it. It's called The Dancer Upstairs. Maybe none of you have seen this movie. It's the first film that was directed by John Malkovich, and it's unique that it was done concurrently, one film in Spanish, one film in English, and it's about a fictional revolution and human relationships in Latin America. I recommend it. Not sure how else. Mark, have you spoken? Take it.
Oh, good evening. My name is Mark Thomas. I'm with Community Boards, and I am the Restorative Justice Coordinator. So I haven't been associated with Neighborhood Court, except now it's been about 20 minutes I've been involved with you. And my favorite movie, I have to watch the whole trilogy of The Lord of the Rings every Christmas time. That's my thing. I like it because of the imagination and the inspiration. Favorite quote is, "Don't worry about when you're going to die," Pippin Gandalf said. Just make best of the opportunity that you got while you're alive. So I try to live up to it. And I'm going to pass it to, did Regina go?
I went, yes.
How about, I guess we're left to people off screen. Nancy? Oh, how about Rachel Vita Vinning?
Okay, hi. Yeah, I'm Rachel. It's actually Vida Venning, and I'm program director at Community Boards. And I've been involved with Neighborhood Courts for about 6 months, so pretty much a newcomer. I don't really have a favorite movie. I like movies though, and it's just thinking about movies that I just have an image of. And the one that came to mind was this movie called Crooklyn, and it has just like incredible textural, the family life of this family in Brooklyn and the set and the music and the interactions. It just like really created the ambiance so well. So that's what came to mind. And let me pass it down to, how about Sharon?
Which one?
You.
Me? Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Tom. I'm with Community Boards. I am an observer. I've been an observer for about, I think, going on 2 years now. Sadly to say, I'm not much of a movie buff, but the one that comes to my mind right now that I enjoyed watching was Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's because of Baby Groot. He was my favorite. And it just kind of shows how in conflict you can also have humor. So that's why I like that movie. So I will pass it to Ellie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ellie. I've been a case manager with Neighborhood Court for about a year now. Actually, on September 20th, it will be a year. And I just recently watched Step Brothers, so that's been, I think that's up there in one of my favorite movies. I'll pass it to Shay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shay. I've been with Neighborhood Courts for about 9 months now. I would say my favorite movie is probably The Lion King. It was the first Disney movie that I saw, and it's been my favorite ever since.
Hasn't gone.
Oh, I'm passing it to the other Sharon.
Thanks, Shay. I'm San Francisco Pretrial Diversion, and I've been managing the neighborhood court program for the last 6 or 7 years. And my favorite movie is the original version of A Star Is Born with Chris Christopherson and Barbara Streisand. And one of the reasons that I love that movie is because I'm a huge Barbara Streisand fan, and I just think it was a great movie, and the music and the movie was also awesome. And I don't know who else is left.
Has everybody gone?
Mary Louise never finished.
Yeah.
Mary Louise?
I'm ready.
There you go.
I have been with neighborhood courts from its inception and through its many revolutions or evolutions. I drop in and out from time to time as other responsibilities demand my attention. My favorite movie is, and here Jackson and I are going to have a bit of disagreement. He stole my thunder regarding Godfather, though, and I 1 through 3, and so we would have to have a separate conversation about 3 because he said he thought number 3 sucked. So he and I have to have a conversation. Hello, Jackson. So good to see you.
You too.
And movies that are closer to home for me is anything Spike Lee. Anything that Spike Lee has done, starting with Do the Right Thing. So, and the young lady that said A Star Is Born, 5 stars. I'm also a huge Barbara Streisand fan. Thanks.
Actually, I think there was an older version than Barbara Streisand and Chris Christopherson. I think I don't remember what, but that's not the original movie, Star Is Born.
Judy
Garland.
Garland.
Did I say the original?
I said the original. Yeah, I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah,
I thought
I
there
would
was
be
one
dating
prior,
my
but I wasn't sure.
I would be dating myself if I said the original, the remake.
Well, thanks everybody. I am so glad that you all came. Jackson, would you like to share your wisdom?
My wisdom, 2 seconds worth. That's all I have on wisdom. But I'm surprised no one actually said Happy Gilmore, which is one of my also favorite movies, along with what Ellie said about Step Brothers. It's kind of like the same genre in terms of silly movies. But anyways, I just want to, thank all of you for, serving the community as a panelist for all these years, and, going around and you folks saying how long you've been involved in the program. It really kind of surprising to me because time has just flown by so fast, and all of you still look so well compared to me, right? But it's thank you all for everything that you do for our neighborhoods, our city, and our communities. And especially I want to say thanks to Mark, Linda, and Doc for sharing your wisdom and your years of experience tonight. As they say, knowledge is power, and knowledge shared is power multiplied. So thank you for willing to do this tonight. So I don't want to say too much. I think we have a great training tonight, and I want to leave as much time as possible for that. But I just want to say, speaking in general, and the nuts and bolts will be coming from our esteemed panel later. But I know that being a lead panelist is not easy. There are so many hats to wear sometimes, and so many things to handle and things to consider. And it requires a combination of professionalism and strong communication skills. And a lot of it is just setting the tone and creating a positive and collaborative environment. But if there's one thing I kind of want to hone in on is just confidence. The lead panelist needs to project confidence, because a lot of times first impressions are so important. So when I say projecting confidence, it's about projecting confidence in yourself, in each other, your co-panelists, as well as others in the room, pre-trial staff, as well as the process itself. So that means, not being too nervous or anxious, and projecting transparency, fairness, and inclusion, right? Because the more that you're at ease, the more they will be too, and we know that in general, a participant, they will form an opinion within the first 30 seconds of meeting all of you. And so, is this a kangaroo court, right? What are these folks all about? Will I get a thrashing? Are these folks pushovers? And they'll kind of react and respond accordingly, at least in the beginning. So if there's one thing I want to just, say is that, the confidence is so important in part of this process. So anyhow, I'll shut up for now, and I will hand it back to Liz. And again, I want to thank all of you for being here today and willing to learn more about this process and be more involved in this process.
Thanks, Jackson. I want to kick off the training by asking the lead panelists to talk about the way that you talk to the other panelists about collaboration, especially during the briefing.
I will start. Why is the briefing important? I've been to hearings where it's nice to make small talk, catch up with everybody. It's important because that builds camaraderie and a collegial atmosphere. But there's a reason why we do the brief, and that is, first and foremost, just to check in. And I've worked with Doc and Linda many times, but we want to see how their day's going and how they feel about being there, that evening, because we have to meet everybody where they're at, our co-panelists and particularly our participants. If we know that there's maybe a hot spot, meaning the pretrial diversion has told us that the participant has been particularly difficult in dealing with them, and they give us a heads up on that. We do a check-in and just say, are we good with that? And can we make the breakthrough with this particular person? And also how we're going to work together in this particular hearing. Are there any things that trigger them? So sometimes I say, what's your style of adjudicating a case? Do you have any pet peeves? Because it's interesting. Because as many times as I've worked with Doc and with Linda, so I've never asked them that. And for instance, last night I was working with Chuck and I said, do you have any pet peeves? And we kind of in a humorous way went back and forth. And I told him one of my pet peeves is I don't like when a question is asked repeatedly, maybe in the hopes of getting a different answer. And my philosophy on that is let's work together to try to figure out a different way to ask the same question in the hopes that we make that breakthrough. Doc, Linda, your feelings about the brief?
Right. So one of the things that's important as I've gained more experience as a lead panelist and understand the role better, one of the things that that I want to find out is how can I, if somebody's off track in terms of questioning, maybe in an inappropriate line of questioning, how do they want me to bring them back? What can I say? What can I do? Because what I found is some people really resent that sort of correction, and so I need to find a way that works for them. So I asked that question, like, what would you like me to do or say if I feel like we're going down the wrong path here? And that's really helpful because then they're part of the process. And it's a little easier than if you have to do that because they've given you permission. So that's helpful. And the other one is making sure that everybody understands the kind of the rules around a break, that if somebody's asking for a break, that you don't decline that request because you have to assume they're asking for a break for a very, very valid reason. So I want to get those sort of ground rules out during the briefing. And I will say, by the way, this is a luxury because before COVID, we didn't have briefings. We walked in at 5 minutes of and did the court, and didn't do a debrief. So this is really a luxury, and I like having it. I think it makes a better session. Doc? You're on mute, Doug.
My bad. Thank you, Linda. So one of the things I wanted to sort of reemphasize is the idea of tracking, which requires active listening skills and not just tracking your questions, but tracking what the other panelists are asking as well. Because I find that sometimes I may ask a question and another panelist will come in and ask the same question, which shows the participant that we're not all paying attention and we're not performing or collaborating as a group. So I find that that's a very useful thing to do is to be able to track each other, and when necessary to jump in after someone has asked a question. There might be an additional opportunity to ask a follow-up question, and sometimes that gets missed. So if I'm tracking Linda's questions, for example, the participant may come back and say, oh, you know what, so XYZ blah blah blah, and I might see an opportunity for an additional question there which I won't see unless I'm tracking it. And then the only other thing I wanted to add is agreeing with if there is an interpreter, to agree on a format for how we engage with the interpreter.
Thanks, Doc. And thanks to both of you. The other thing I was curious about is after the participant enters, what are your techniques to help the participant open up?
I'll lead off with that, although I'm probably going to steal Mark's thunder because Steve's the one that really taught me this. One of the things that Mark did as lead panelist that I observed was he created a really welcoming space for that person, and made sure that they understood. And I think this is really important, that this court is different than a regular court, and a lot of people, especially people from who maybe aren't native born, these concepts are very new. And the idea that this isn't a court where somebody's going to find you guilty or innocent is quite new. So these probing questions and trying to get at what was going on, some people are not used to that. And I think explaining to them how the court is different and that we're just neighbors, and we're neighbors who are trying to work with them to make sure this doesn't happen again. It's more collaborative. And I think to the extent that you can convey that so they feel it, it's not just words, but they really feel it through your behavior, I think makes it a lot easier for them to open up when we ask what might be considered fairly probing questions. I hope I didn't steal your thunder, Mark. That's what you do so well.
You're muted, Mark.
Doc, do you want to ring in on this?
Sure. So one of the things that we do is the introduction piece, which is so critical. And I find that there are several things that we as lead panelists can do to sort of, decrease the participants' a level of anxiety or stress or whatever. And there are several ways, and I'll talk about the way I do it. The first thing I would say when someone comes into court is that, welcome, address them by their first name, ask them how they want to be addressed. And then let them know right off the top two things. One, that the police report is new and we have not heard it before. So we're coming in with a fresh pair of eyes. And two, to assure them that we're not here to blame you or to judge you. We're just here to talk talk through the hearing, listen to the hearing, talk it through with them, and come up with directives that are optimal and that will help them to move forward after the hearing is done today. All right, Mark?
I often employ positive words, such as conversation, rather than, we're going to ask you a series of questions. Well, in fact, we're asking them a series of questions. When it's framed as we're going to have a conversation with them, I think it takes pressure down a little bit. And I sometimes use phrases like, we want to partner with you, meaning getting their buy-in to work with us. Because when they hear partner, we're sort of on the same level. We're not up above sort of deciding their fate. And I've often found, and I don't use it in all instances, but you have to have sort of some intuition about it. With certain people, when you say, we'd really like to partner with you tonight to figure this thing out, and talk in real, just conversational tones, it does help with a breakthrough. That's all I have at this moment.
The only other thing I would advise, and this is a lesson I had to learn, not just for this, but for mediations and coaching that I do, you have to really pay attention to what's in front of you. So what is that person bringing to this session? You need to be aware of that. So if they're bringing a lot of shame or fear, just your antenna need to be out for what the thing is that they're bringing, and that's the thing that you then address. Not everybody comes in with shame and fear, and some do. So it's just, you can't treat every participant who comes in the same. You really have to be kind of empathetic and really monitor and watch, what is that person bringing to the session, and how do is it getting in the way of a productive session? And I think to that extent, you have to be fluid.
And if I could add to that, Linda, one thing about creating empathy is the ability and the practice of listening to what a participant is saying, because oftentimes they will throw out a nugget, a really useful tidbit, like, who was affected by this incident? My 2-year-old son. And then a follow-up question, I might ask is, what's his name or her name? they will respond because, you know, it's information that they're voluntarily sharing, which gives us an opportunity to then step in and, you know, engage with them in a way that shows that we care beyond what's happening in court and just beyond the facts. So we're actually making a real human connection, and we're establishing a trust relationship with them from the get-go. And that gives us a better opportunity to engage them and encourage them to open up as the hearing progresses.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce the next part of it, Mark? There are vignettes.
I would. I just need to be directed in where I am on this.
I believe it's point number 1. Participant may just want to apologize rather than.
No, I was going to introduce. We're going to each introduce our own scenario, but
That's correct. So go ahead, Linda.
Okay, well, just so you know, we're going to try and demonstrate some things that you encounter and show how we might handle them, and then this would be something that we debrief when this is all said and done, and then you can ask us questions. So the first scenario is really when you have a participant who's really resisting questions. You know, they just want to say, I'm sorry, I did it. I take full responsibility. I'll never do it again. And it doesn't give you anything to work with. And they're very resistant to answering the kinds of questions we need in neighborhood court. So that's the scenario. I'll be the lead panelist. And the scenario is, this is a participant who was selling alcohol at Fisherman's Wharf, which is something we're seeing quite a bit of lately. So, all right. And Liz will be the participant. And so I'm going to start off. So I'll just ask a few questions. I'll start off with, so Liz, now we've read the police report, and thank you for adding your information to it. Can you tell us what was going on for you that day?
Well, you know, I needed the money, but I'm not going to do it again. So don't worry about it. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And I will not, you won't see me back here again.
That's great. And we don't want to see you back here, Liz. That's great. But in order for us to come up with really the steps that you need to make this right, we'd like to know a little bit more about you. So let me ask another question. So tell me who you think might have been harmed by your action?
Well, I don't think anybody was really harmed because I didn't even get to sell anything yet before I was arrested. And nobody will be harmed because I won't ever do it again. And no matter, I know it was wrong and I won't do it. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay. And again, appreciate that. But Liz, you know what? We'd like to know a little bit more about you. Tell me something about you. Tell me something that you would like us to know before we come up with directives. What should we know about you?
Well, I have 2 kids and I really wanted to be able to take them to the movies and also to make sure that they had dinner every night, and I can't always keep them, entertained like their friends. And so I just met up with someone who said if I just took this cooler down to dock, I could sell this and it would be nothing, and then I would have money that day to take my kids to the movie and take them out to dinner. So
okay. Thank you, Liz. And I'm going to stop there because now we're into a session that we can start working with. She's given us some information that we can work with. So the point of that was just to show how you can sort of gently nudge people into different behavior. And thank you, Liz, for being cooperative. Okay. And then the second role play.
So in this scenario, at the end of reading the police report, and we asked the participant, do you have anything to add? And it starts to drift into the not taking responsibility and how we reel that back in. I'll be the lead panelist, and I believe, Doc, you're the participant. Okay, so you've heard the police report. Do you have anything to add to it that will help us decide your case?
So I did, and the report sounds pretty accurate, but I was driving along, minding my own business, and I got stopped by a police cruiser. And yeah, I had some money on me, but it just happened that I was I was in the location in that neighborhood at the time.
Okay, so basically the report generally reflects what went on that night, correct?
Kind of.
Okay. What do you mean by kind of?
Well, I'm not sure I should assume responsibility for the fact that I was told that I was there for, I was being stopped and arrested for something which I hadn't even done. So I was confused about that.
Thank you for sharing that. For the purposes of our hearing, it's not going to matter because we're not a finder of fact and we don't decide guilt or innocence, but rather we try to work with coming up with a forward plan for you to complete. So that being said, we've gotten a lot of advanced material, but restorative justice is really in identifying harms and sort of getting you to move beyond specific details, because the cornerstone to our program is that you do take responsibility for the actions you were charged with. So I really need to know, do you take responsibility? I'm asking point blank if you take responsibility for the actions.
So I do have a question. What are my options if I am not exactly sure if I'm not 100%?
Thanks for that. Well, since the overriding principle in restorative justice is that you need to take responsibility for your actions, the alternative would be that we would send the case back to 850 Bryant to the criminal courts. Do you have some idea of what it's like to appear in a criminal court in front of a judge?
I don't. To be honest, I'd rather not find out.
If you'd rather not find out, then you're in the right place here where we resolve it through restorative justice. So do I have your agreement that we're going to work it through tonight? We're going to listen to you, and we're going to try to come up with the very best directive we can. And so that you understand, a directive is just a plan moving forward, steps you need to take. And we're going to tailor this plan based on answers that you've given us to make sure that we set you up for successful outcome. So you on board?
Now that you've explained it in language that's more clear to me, yes, I will assume responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, in the next scenario, what we're going to talk about, we're going to demonstrate what happens when you've got a panelist that's kind of veering off in what I would call the wrong direction. They're asking questions that might be inappropriate or just things that are not best practice for neighborhood courts. And as lead panelist, you have to figure out some way to rein that in because, ultimately you're in charge of this. So we're going to demonstrate what that looks like. And the scenario here will be a prostitution case, a solicitation case, and I'm going to be the panelist who's asking inappropriate questions, and Mark will be the lead panelist who's trying to rein me in, and we'll demonstrate that. And I don't think we need a participant, but Liz, I'll use you if we do. Okay. All right. So Liz, I'm curious why you thought you needed to solicit a prostitute. You're an attractive woman. It's hard to imagine you have trouble meeting people. So I'm just curious, why you thought you had to do that.
So Linda, I'm gonna just step in here and to let you know that I'd like to sort of put that question on the back burner because the previous question that Doc asked, I think, had a lot of probative value, and I think it's important right now for us to unpack Doc's previous question. So I'd like to flip it back over to Doc to expound on that last question.
Yeah, in just a second though, Mark. Yeah, let's go back to Doc. He did ask a good question, but I just wanted to follow up a little bit because there's just so many ways that Liz, that you could meet people. You mentioned that you're in tech. There's lots of groups that you could join. There's church groups. There's all kinds of options that you could have used that you wouldn't have found yourself on the streets in this situation.
So Linda and Doc, I think now would be a good time just for us to take a break so that I can confer with the both of you, and if our participant needs to use the restroom, or anybody from pretrial needs to use the restroom, now would be a good time to do it. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes to confer, and we'll be back at 6:50. Thank you.
So a footnote I want to add to this scenario is that, we never want to put the onus on the participant that they are responsible for us wanting to take a break, because we are the panelists, and, it's up to us to manage that whole panel process and question and answer process. So the participant should not feel like they're the reason why we're caucusing.
And I'll also add, it's rare that you need to stop somebody in this way. Usually people are sensitive to the gentle pushing that you're doing as a lead panelist. And I've only seen a few times where a break was really necessary. But when they are, it's what has to be done.
Doc, would you do the redirect differently than just that pro forma one that I did?
No, I think you did it fine. I honestly can't think of another way to do it at the moment. So I don't have any additional to add.
And one of the benefits of the briefing is that you've established with the panelists how they can be corrected. Because if you don't, and then you're in the situation, whatever you're trying, it's just a lot better to have their buy-in, and then they know what's happening. Because if you're trying to redirect in a way that they are uncomfortable with, that can play out kind of negatively in front of the participant. So.
And to state the obvious, it's important that the lead panelist, or actually anybody, can stop. It doesn't have to be the lead panelist. It could just be another panelist who wants to put the bad question in check. But it's important that you do it, obviously, before the participant has any opportunity to respond to that. So you have to be ready just to come in. And importantly, it does not have to be the lead panelist in every instance. If another panelist is to the point of discomfort, I would rather have them call for a break than continue with one or more of the panelists being in discomfort about the nature of the question.
And I think this is a good time to say that anything we're demonstrating and anything that's in the lead panelist guide, it's not restricted to lead panelists. It's just that ultimately the lead panelist has that responsibility if it isn't happening. So these things are not restricted to just the lead panelist. Okay. So then the next one is really about directives. I think, Mark, you were going to do the lead into that.
So all of you have been down this road before, so nothing is strikingly new, but we're trying to sort of demonstrate the flow of things. Often there's a mediation within our hearing, and that mediation is between panelists in trying to form a directive. And so we'd like to model that, and also model the best practices in actually delivering the directive. So the premise of this, again, is, what was the premise of this?
This was a prostitution case, and we have 3 or 4 directives, and there's some difference of opinion about one of the directives. Yeah. Okay.
So we're now entering our deliberation. And as a lead panelist, I always like to involve my co-panelists first. So Doc, what are you thinking? How are you feeling about this case? Do you have any suggestions as to what would be a good parts of the directive for this particular individual?
Okay, thank you, Mark. So based on what the information that the participant has shared with us, I am thinking, and this is where I'm going to deliberate and provide a directive, which may not be as appropriate. I think, Mark and Linda, that maybe a good directive might be a plan of action for the individual, Mr. Hisham, to basically come up with a list of things, goals that he would like to set for himself and execute over a 6-month period. And hopefully get him back on the path where he'll know how to avoid getting in trouble with the police and with solicitation in future.
Thanks for that, Doc. You know, you are known as the king of the plan moving forward. So let's go over the first two pieces and see how your plan fits into that. So we're doing FOPP online, and we're doing X number of sessions of thinking for a change.
Mhm.
Linda, how do you think Doc's action plan matches up to that?
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of the plan. I like the plan, but I'm wondering in this case if it's really if that's what we want them to be thinking about, because that doesn't seem to be the problem that they're facing. It seems like the biggest problem that this person expressed was that they're very secluded, very lonely, a little bit depressed. And I'm wondering if we might change that to, and also they didn't seem to really understand the risks that they were facing. And I'm wondering if the write-up could be more of what did they learn in FOPP that they didn't know? And also in thinking for a change, what are the benefits they got? Because we hear people get benefits from that. Maybe for them to kind of identify the benefits would be really helpful. What we're finding is some people even go back on their own. So it feels like if they could talk about what they learned from that, what they benefited from that would be more productive than necessarily a goal-oriented plan.
You know, I have, in rethinking about it after both of you mentioned the points that you're making, I think those would be more constructive. That would be a more constructive directive to have him write up something about what he learned. So I agree with you.
And so, Doc, the same way that you're a fan of the action plan, often when we send participants to FOPP, they're particularly thinking for a change. I like them to write about what their major takeaways were from that, or even give them an option and say, what did you like best about thinking for a change, and what didn't resonate with you? Because that forces them to listen, it forces them to take notes, and it forces them to think. And I think with both, you know, self-study FOPP online now, you can just dial it in. You know, there's not much there, but if you're required to at least give us some takeaway points and articulate those, it does require you to sort of focus. And you know, FOPP, in the instances where we've asked them, particularly what their takeaways were, both positive and negative, I found those to be really rewarding when I was able to see what they wrote about it. So, yeah, I think that we're good with FOPP, with thinking for a change, X number of sessions for thinking for a change, and rather than calling it a reflective paper, just give us your major takeaways from both of those programs. Last question is any payment into the community fund?
Yeah, they don't, money doesn't seem to be a primary hardship for this particular person, and they were willing to pay $150 to the prostitute. So I would recommend that we ask them to pay that to the neighborhood community fund.
I would agree with Linda. As long as we don't make it punitive, I'm okay with a dollar amount that is appropriate for the offense.
Okay.
So what Linda's suggesting is the price that was negotiated with the sex workers, so that we create sort of a
I'm okay with
close
that.
the loop, a perfect circle, so to speak. Good with that, Doc?
Absolutely. I would also like to suggest one additional directive to call them back for an exit interview or a follow-up to see how effective the directives were for them, if the two of you are in agreement with it.
I'm unsure about that, Doc, because knowing how difficult scheduling is and bringing them back in for a follow-up hearing is the only utility in that is if the three of us are hearing the follow-up hearing. So I might defer to pretrial diversion just to find out is that too difficult to do. If it's not, and it's I would kind of think it's productive, but I just want to understand why in this particular prostitution case, as opposed to any others that you think a follow-up is useful?
My logic for that is that to see, to kind of question them after they've gone through all the directives and to see if they've managed to maybe make additional connections which might prevent them from, repeating the same offense.
So I would hope, Doc, that we would get that out of the paper that they write. We would get that kind of information. Anything that the learning that we're hoping they get would show up in that paper. I feel like that would be enough.
Okay, fair enough.
And I tend to agree with Linda. So we're landing on 150 to the community fund, FOPP online, thinking for a change, X number of sessions. And then when they're through with all of that, a very short write-up on what their takeaways were, both positive and negative, from their experience at both going through the online FOP and also thinking for a change. Good?
Works for me.
All right, so let's rock and roll. So we're bringing the participant back in, and
So Mark, can I just add in one quick thing regarding?
Sure.
Okay. So just the part that you guys talked about, I don't know whether this is included in the the paper that that person's going to do, but anytime someone can put that on the paper regarding identifying the harms and repairing those harms, to the community, other impacted parties, that's like one of the primary things that that person or the participant should focus on. Right? What are the impacts to other folks that they may not know of or think about? So
thank you for that, Jackson. And I think in this instance, it's a little binary, and that is, FOP is what's going to give them the education about human trafficking and other harms around sex work and prostitution and impacts on the community. And then the FOPP portion, the Thinking for a Change portion is more about maybe repairing themselves and the harm that could have come to them. So thanks for that. I agree with you, and that's a great addition. That in probably any writing assignment of any type that involves prostitution or something that truly has great harm to the community and to individuals, and maybe even advancing a criminal enterprise, since many sex workers are connected to a larger criminal organization. I'd be in favor of that, so thank you for that addition.
But I was going to also ask Jackson, I think what you're saying is really valid, and I think it's something that would be helpful to, maybe we could include that in some way in the panelist guide, or just where we have information about directives, because I think what you're saying is that it's always that one of the most difficult thing for any panelist is to connect them to the harm, because they don't see harm to other people, right? And so what you're saying is to kind of reinforce that connection, always reinforce that connection, find different ways to do it. And that's good to remember when we think about writing assignments. And maybe we can put that in the lead panelist guide, in the directive portion.
And the biggest disconnect is twofold. One is there's a cultural component to it, so that if you ask often people from Mexico, Central America, Latin America, they don't always pick up on what harm is. So you often get an answer, well, there was no physical force involved, and there's something gets lost in the translation, or they may come from a place where prostitution is rampant and it's just part of their culture. And the other thing is, regardless of where they're from or whatever, regardless of their cultural background, the big leap is for participants to understand harm to the broader community. And sometimes you have to start smaller. So I've asked participants, well, if you lived at 14th and Cap, you and your wife and your two small children, how would you feel if this was going on talk to me if this was going on right in front of your house. And when they're detached from it, I don't care, they just drove down there. But all of a sudden they have sort of a different feeling if it's happening right in front of their house. They live at 14th and Cap. So sometimes you have to sort of twist it up a little bit to demonstrate that it's not good for the block, it's not good for the neighborhood, and it certainly isn't good for San Francisco. You sort of have to build that through a series of asking questions and hearing their response. And the last thing I'll say is, it's just a general comment, that it's really important that we listen to understand as opposed to listen to respond. And I know how we think. They're giving us information, so we're trying to rush to what's our next question. How are we going to respond to that? But when we listen to understand, Doc made a really good example. We're trying to pick out nuggets of information. They may not be really apparent, but when you pick up those little nuggets and somehow you're saying, you mentioned something about your family in Colombia. Can you tell us some more about that? And it turns out, they may have children that they haven't seen, and somehow you start to build their story. And building their story through them, I think, really helps us in tailoring a directive that's needed. I'm done.
Did you want to illustrate how you'd like to give directives before we open it up to Q&A?
I would love to.
Thank you.
So we welcome them back in. I just have a little thing that I do, and it's just my thing. It's in my toolbox because I found it to be effective. And it's still in relationship building. And I'll ask them, did it feel like you were out there a long time? And they often smile and say, well, yeah, thinking like the worst is going to come. And I say, well, it's because we had a really thoughtful conversation about your case. And we really listened to you. We did some deep listening, and it made us want to come up with the best possible directive for you. And that's why it took some time to work it out. If they say, no, it wasn't too long, then I say, well, that's because we got so much good information from you and you were so engaged in the process that coming to a directive, you made it pretty easy for us because we think we've come up with a home run for you, something along those lines. And the only reason I use those tools and I demonstrate that is they still may think, okay, I'm coming in, here comes the punishment. And I'm talking about how hard we worked and how hard we listened to them and how we really tried to tailor it to them. And it puts a real positive spin on things. So in delivering the directive, most important thing I say at the beginning is, right now we're going to go through the plan. I call it a plan directive for you. And it's in 3 parts. You don't have to write anything down now. What I need you to do is just listen, because pretrial diversion, your case manager is going to follow up with you in detail. So let's just listen to the 3 parts of your or 4 parts of your directive. And then we go through and we explain each one and why we chose that for them. So for instance, in Thinking for a Change, I often tell people it's a time-tested program that we have, and that we found some really good outcomes and really positive results from it, and that many participants really got a lot out of it. And the benefit of it is sometimes these things are difficult to talk with people you know very close. But here you're sharing it with strangers. It's in confidence, and you have a facilitator, a moderator, that's going to help you and help other people in Thinking for a Change sort of share their stories. Not much to say about FOPP except to say it's online, it's self-study, you can do it at your own pace. There's good information in there because it covers lots of topics One that's critical is human trafficking, because many people that engage or hire sex workers don't really understand, that not all of them are there under their own volition. And there's a lot of organized crime involved. And somehow you talk about each one, why you chose it, and why we chose it, and how they would benefit from it. So it's always there's benefit to this, and then I become a cheerleader. That's just my style. I say, I think you're going to complete this successfully, but you're going to get something out of it. And Doc, your ideas about delivering a directive?
The only thing that I would like to add to that is, Thinking for a Change is a very positive program, and I completely agree with you. And I think most of you use that quite effectively as well. What I do like to do for the participant is to make that connection for them, that in that program, there is a facilitator who will listen if you choose to share your story, and make the connection between your actions and the consequences. And in that process, they'll kind of get a better idea of, okay, why am I going to this kind of therapy or behavior therapy, right? Because essentially that's what it is. It's, behavior therapy to change their behaviors or actions and to prevent them from doing it again. So sometimes I find it helpful to share just a little bit more so they understand what it's all about.
Linda, your ideas about delivering a directive?
Well, it's very similar. It's very positive. I mean, I audited FOPP twice, all day, twice. I think I deserved a medal for that. But I always share that with them and say it's amazing. It's amazing what you learn. So I am very enthusiastic about the directives that we give. The same thing with Thinking for a Change. When I found out that some people go back on their own, which is just amazing to me, I always let people know that some people find it so helpful they continue on even after they've met the requirement of the sessions that we've required, so that they get a sense that we're very enthusiastic about what we're asking them to do. And I think you're right, Mark, always connect the benefit. And then the restoration fund, the community fund is, it relates them to maybe they haven't seen the harm to the community, but what we're saying is there is harm and here's a way to make up for it. So when we deliver that directive, I always connect it to the benefit that this fund has for the community, and how this can help repair the harm done to the community for these kinds of issues. So it's kind of, I think the important thing is to make sure they understand what a directive is. It's really the steps they have to take, and then make sure that we're very positive about it, and make sure we always connect whatever we're giving them to the reason we're giving it to them. There needs to be a purpose behind each one.
And you make a very important point about the contribution into the community fund, because unless you explain it, they think, oh, it's just a penalty. I'm paying a penalty. And I often just give them this tiny synopsis, and a couple of times a year, the district attorney's office solicits requests for proposals, and many nonprofits that help underserved youth, or and just go through some real positive type of nonprofits that have received our money, and then I can say, so your money is going to be well spent in the community. So that way they're not thinking I just got penalized.
So in addition to this, I will say, like when Mark talked about having kind of the thing he says before the directive, I think as lead panelists, it really helps to have your own little scripts. So one time where you've got a lot to say, and you got to remember to say it, is when you're starting the directives, because there's some ways to introduce that we need to do. The other time is when you're talking about the process, when you're trying to explain to the participant what the process will be like. There can be a lot of details there, and I think it really helps to have kind of a script in your mind that's suitable to you, that conveys those thoughts. So as lead panelists, I think it helps to kind of write your own, or have, like Mark has them in his head, just have those things ready, because you're going to have to do it, and it helps to have something, in my mind, prepared a little bit so you don't forget the points we have to make. So just wanted to add that.
In furtherance of what Linda just said, the overarching principle for me in wanting to be a lead panelist and taking such pleasure in doing it is developing my own style. And I was a panelist for maybe a year or two before I was a lead panelist. And I saw behaviors modeled that I thought were good. And I also saw behaviors that were modeled that I didn't think were effective. And I didn't want to make part of my my repertoire. I wanted to avoid them. So that's all. So the overarching principle for me is develop your own style, something that you're comfortable with, but it's also producing positive outcomes.
Within the guidelines, within the framework. Yeah, yeah.
Last thing I'll say is, I hope Jackson doesn't get pissed at me, and I might be breaking the rule book here, but I don't always insist on delivering the directive as a lead panelist. Because if I find through the process of the hearing that the participant really connected with one of the other panelists, I may have them deliver it. In the past, Doc and I have both shared the responsibility of delivering the directive. And Soma Night Court, where for many years I worked with Jerry Green and Linda McKay, all three of us may have shared it. And it's not a common practice, but there was something intuitive that we felt that it telegraphed we were all on board with this. We were all part of coming up with this directive. We weren't just checking off boxes. The scary thing is, if they think you just went through a laundry list of what we have to give them, and that was it, I don't know that you send off a satisfied customer. So that's it for me.
And just as I said in the beginning, it's important to remember that any of this can be done by any of the panelists. It's just that the lead panelist needs to make sure it all happens and happens correctly. So somebody could be giving directives, somebody else could talk about the process. You just need to agree on those things at the beginning. There's no reason why we have to do every bit of it, because we're working with very senior people who are probably lead panelists in other courts. So there's no need not to share some of this. Okay.
Anything to say before we open it up to Q&A?
I just want to chime in and say that I really kind of love the way that Mark does it, because the way that he does it is he itemizes the things that need to be done. He explains why they chose that and how it would benefit that particular participant. And it's very clear, or he makes it very clear with the participant, that these are the things. And if you have any questions, you're free to ask questions. Plus, that they don't have to write it down or memorize what was just said, because, either Shay or Ellie will talk to them outside the room and write it on a piece of paper for them to take away on that already. So that builds a lot of buy-in at the end of that, and a lot of good feeling. So when they leave the room, I wouldn't say they're excited to get started with it, but they have a clear picture and a clear, a roadmap about what they need to do and how to do it.
Agreed.
Do you have any last words?
Yeah, can I make just one other point? So from the beginning of when I joined neighborhood court, and Susan Stone was my primary trainer, we're always told, be creative when you're coming up with a directive. That's one of the hardest things to do, is to be creative, to figure out, how do I go off our normal script, our normal, punch list, to do something that may resonate with them. And that's why we're trying to find out some stuff about them. And for instance, they may say, Ralph Lane always used to say, what's a good day for you? What's a good day for you? And that's just a way of opening people up. And they may say, well, my day off, I love to do gardening. I have this huge garden, and my neighbor has this huge garden with all different kinds of plants, and I go over there and I just get lost in the work. So the light's going off over my head. Is there some nonprofit? Is there somewhere where they can do landscaping and gardening as part of their community service? And this is all part of the just delving into what it is. Because being creative is very hard. It's very hard. So that's why picking up on little hints they give you, if you can circle back, and there's some possible way of getting it into their directive, That's the opening for being creative.
Doc, is there anything you'd like to say before we open it up?
Oh, let's open it up.
So, anybody? Well, first of all, let's thank Doc and Linda and Mark for sharing all that and all the hard work that went into all that, the panel and the discussion and the vignettes. And if anyone would like to ask questions or bring up a subject for discussion, please voice it now.
Yeah, I have my hand raised.
Yes, please go.
Very informative. I learned a lot. I want to focus on a few things. I agree totally that the opening introductions, the participant walks in is very important. Having all the panelists introduce themselves, having the participant introduce themselves with a little bit more detail, because I think essentially the story of their life, story of where they have been and going, very helpful in guiding our directives. And a focus on the harm that was done, I think, is very, very important, because people tend to perhaps not realize the harm they have done. Many issues are often group dynamics. You know, not all the participants act alone. They have groups that they get into and they're led in the wrong way. And I think that's part of the story that one has to look at, and how do you get a more sense of individual responsibility and not following the pack, so to speak. I found that the letter of self-reflection is very, very important, having them look at the harm they've done, look at their lives, and perhaps the panel can give them a little nudge in a direction that they haven't really looked at. There are a lot of stories about people who missed opportunities in life. I think that the panel could be a seminal moment in changing their lives. In fact, some of the letters of reflection have said that the court actually did alter the course of their life and the way they're thinking. I think that's really what the courts have been really, you know, kind of important in that type of life-changing potential. So thank you for all the good information.
Thank you, Howard. Chuck, would you like to go?
Sure. Again, thank you to Liz for organizing this event. I don't necessarily aspire to lead, but I like looking at this through a different lens. So thank you to Mark and Doc and Linda for being so generous with your time. My question is, at what point do each one of you feel like it's appropriate to introduce the piece about harms in the course of a discussion? And does that vary depending upon the answers that you receive?
I'll take the first shot at that. Sometimes you're struggling just to get a person opening up to your questions at all. So you know, some people are very easy. They understand some basic principles of restorative justice. They understand the concept of harm. It's not hard to make that connection. With some people, it's not a concept that they're familiar with. So sometimes you ask it in very different ways. Like, for the example, the liquor on Fisherman's Wharf. You know, who's hurt and whose business might be damaged, and that's, you know, it's just a different way of saying harm. But with some people, I think you just have to play it by person. Some people are really struggling with just the whole community boards, the whole neighborhood court process. So I would be a little slower in introducing the concept of harm. And find other languages, find other ways to describe it. They don't have to buy into the actual word harm. They just need to buy into the fact of the harm, if that makes sense. So it's good to have some other ways of talking about it.
Well, one of the common questions I've heard over the years is very simple, like, who else was impacted? That's all, you know. And then they allow space and time for that participant to answer, whether it's 45 seconds or a minute and a half. I think there's been a point where there's been 2 minutes of complete silence where the participant is allowed to think about, who else was impacted by the act. So
That's a really good one. If I could add to that, Jackson. So we had a lot of DUI cases during the pandemic, and one of the questions that I would ask is, what happened if you ended up in an accident and you died? Who was impacted? And usually that will draw a good 30 seconds of silence, because they'll look shocked and they're like, "What? I didn't even think of the possibility." And that gives me that gives the panelists the opportunity to then talk about the potential harms and who might be impacted outside of the individual themselves.
Can I just make a comment? I find it most difficult sometimes for people to understand the harm in graffiti cases, because especially when you have young people who think of themselves as artists or whatever, they don't quite they don't get it. A lot of times like you say, well, how would you feel if you lived in a neighborhood with this stuff all over the place? They'd say, oh, it's great. I like this stuff. Those are the cases that I find the most difficult sometimes to get someone to understand the harm, because they're young people and, whatever. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying.
One of the things that I found early on helpful was there's so much information online about the cost to San Francisco of graffiti. It's just phenomenal. And so if you have a young person who's very tech savvy anyway, if they do a paper on what's the cost of San Francisco, it's in multi-millions of dollars. And that's maybe a way for them to discover it on their own, but a way to connect harm to what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
The other difficult one is shoplifting from Macy's. So, people shoplift from Macy's and they think of Macy's as this huge monolith. So they're not going to miss these 3 pairs of Calvin Klein pants that I took. It's $150. And somehow it's hard for them to understand the harm to Macy's. So then you have to say, what about bystanders? What about families that are shopping there? And somehow you have to just keep drawing it out. And I found that shoplifting from Macy's, people just go, they don't care. Macy's. And that's a tough one for me.
I think you're right.
And again, if you go to the internet and you do retail theft, and you see that it's one of the motivating factors of many of these stores closing, all you have to do is walk up and down Market Street, and sure, Walgreens opened way too many stores, but I think without rampant theft and shrinkage of inventory, a lot more of those would be open. But again, it's hard to connect with that.
Mark, that's not been my experience. When you ask people in shoplifting cases, they understand intellectually that it raises the cost of everything for everybody. I've never seen anyone, they may think that, so what, it's Macy's, but intellectually they know that already. But it's much more difficult, I think, with graffiti cases. I don't know, maybe it's just the kind of people that are doing it.
Anybody else have something they want to bring up, discuss?
Yeah, well, I actually want to go back to I believe is a second scenario where the person was denying the particular charge. And so I just want to make it clear that the participant, one of the requirements of participating in the program is that the person needs to take accountability for their role in the incident. And so they get that information several times. The first time they probably get it is in the FAQ and the information sheet that is sent to them. And that information is actually in red font and in bold, so they can't miss it. So when they come in saying that, well, they're basically saying, well, that I didn't do that, or that person who did that wasn't me. They're either being disingenuous or they didn't read the information. So whenever someone comes in and say that, you know, then the antenna or the radar needs to go up.
Jackson, I have a question for you. That's one of the problems I've seen on our panels, where some people are very reluctant to proceed if they don't have a really clear affirmation of responsibility, right? And actually, I found you to be a little more flexible, because it's sometimes people don't want to say the exact same words that you want them to say, but they're kind of saying, yes, yeah, you know, in general, yes, I take responsibility for the role. Maybe I didn't do it exactly that way. Prostitution cases, we had a case where he didn't complete the act, and we had to remind him it was solicitation. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of resistance, but I don't want. I think originally I was a little too quick to want to send them back to 850 Bryant, and I think you actually have been, I thought, a little more flexible in terms of how people express that responsibility or that accountability. So maybe you can speak to that.
I mean, if they're willing to, and I'll give you an example. There was a case, a battery case, where a person who was intoxicated, he took a cab, and he got in a disagreement with the cab driver, and he threw the drink that he was holding, hitting the cab driver in the head. At the hearing, he didn't remember that he did that. But, you know, when he heard the police report and his alleged role in that, he said, wow, I guess I must have done that, although I don't remember it, you know? So he was willing to take responsibility for that, although he didn't remember doing that. So, you know.
Well, the police report is a triggering thing, because you could cut the other way, where the person's coming in here and saying, yeah, okay, you know, take responsibility. I just want to get rid of this. My lawyer told me to come here. It's better than going to court. And then when they hear the police report, that triggers them. And they say, that's not the way I remember it going down. And so it can cut either way. And not all police reports are stellar writing. So that's the nicest way I can say it.
Yeah.
Well, it's 7:30. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, especially yours, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to say one thing there quick. I would call for a break. If you're trying to, as a panel, trying to decide whether to send it back to 850 Bryant, I would definitely call for a break, because you want to talk to a community board support person and pretrial before you make that. It's a hard decision, so don't make it so rashly.
You know, and also, you know, if the person, if the police report, if the person is agreeing to or disagreeing with an immaterial fact, right? Like, oh, the report said this happened at 7:30. It happened at 9:30, you know? But if it's something material, then that's something that you guys really need to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda and Mark and Doc, so much. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It was really nice to see you.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
Thank you
Really
all.
great. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
job, everyone. Good night.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.